Come and see 1985 and its director Elem Klimov. A crash course on war, tragedy and film. The Soviet-Russian film director Elem Klimov was born on the 9th of July 1933 and lived a 70-year-long life. Klimov was born to staunch communist parents who derived his name as an acronym from the names Engels, Lenin and Marx to create Elem. During the Battle of Stalingrad, Klimov, his baby brother and his mother evacuated their home in 1942 after a petrol bombing and crossed the Volga River on a makeshift raft. Klimov recounts the experience of being a curious child, peeking out from under the rags and pillows his mother had lain on him, along with herself, to protect him from the flames. He tells of how the sky rained fire and how even the water was ablaze with the gasoline flames, 1.5 kilometers wide, heating up the river to boiling temperature. The entire 60-kilometer strip of land he knew as home was burning. He described it as literal hell. Klimov was born in the year Hitler came into power in Nazi Germany and grew up in a Soviet era under Stalin, a highly oppressive and violent time from within and without. Russia was invaded in 1941 with an 8-year-old Klimov in Stalingrad, which was also a particularly barbaric centerpiece to the war. Klimov was 12 when World War II ended in 1945, but the communist regime of Soviet Russia was far from over. As with all filmmakers, content creators, people who spark thought, or really anyone in the USSR at the time, Klimov's life was fundamentally regulated by the totalitarian state-controlled system, and so too it would be when he started making films. The government had always recognized the highly potent propagandistic potential of film, but initially this caused a ban of foreign films and film stock into Russia. What makes the very first Soviet filmmakers special is that this did not deter them. They sourced any and all film stock they could find and began the process of studying films, dissecting film reels, recomposing them, experimenting with shot length and order. They became experts in filmic study long before ever having made films themselves. Though Stalin's reign was brutal, it did allow Western films to flow back into the USSR and for film stock to be available. Thus, the Gerasimov Institute of Cinematography, or VGIK, was state-funded in its founding in 1990, and the first Soviet filmmakers started to create cinema with a vengeance in the early 1920s.
Hello, Berlin.
Albeit under regulation. Socialist realism became the new state-supported cinema style. Realistic stories that support communist ideals, stories that were made more emotional and more accessible to the masses. All this sets the scene for 1957 when a 24-year-old Klimov graduated from the Higher Institute of Aviation in Moscow and considered journalism before enrolling into the VGIK, which is actually the first film school ever established in the world. It is still active today since its founding in 1919 by Vladimir Gardin and Lev Kuleshov, also making it the oldest. It boasted with names such as Sergei Eisenstein, Vsevolod Pudovkin, and Andrei Tarkovsky as teachers. Despite many obstructions, the Soviet filmmakers had a huge and vital influence on the filmic world and its development, especially in terms of editing. With concepts such as the Kuleshov effect and much deeper understandings of montage and its poetic and intellectual applications, as in Soviet montage, they believed this to be the true power of cinema. The ability to juxtapose two shots together to create a new and often unrelated meaning, and how this meaning could be shifted and changed. An ability unique to this visceral, auditory visual filmic medium. Even the very process of chopping and changing, the very hands-on act of putting a film together, melded well with the communistic grittiness of the worker, the empowered builder. It was a political act. Klimov himself eventually also taught at the first film school ever made and went on to carve out his place in cinema history. Come and See 1985 is a seminal work of its time because it completely subverts all of the previous depictions of war and of the children in war. Unlike propaganda films such as Fall of Berlin 1950, Moscow Strikes Back 1942, or even the animated propaganda piece, Fascist Barbarians, A Lesson Not Learnt 1971. Come and See scrubs away the glory, the patriotism, the propaganda, and leaves an open wound that begs to be seen for what it truly is. The narrative structure itself is opposite from communist ideals too. The focus is on the individual experience of the protagonist as a tale of disillusionment on the spoils of war, and then the survival of it. It rusts the rosy cheeks of children depicted in pro-war, pro-glory to the motherland posters and crumbles them into the bitter reality of death and unrightable wrongs. Unhealable wounds that pass on through generations and echo to all corners of humanity. For such a film to exist only in the dying years of the Soviet Union only makes sense. Klimov had to promote and vouch for the film for more than 7 years before filming could start. He and his co-author, Ales Adamovich, had to change the original title, Kill Hitler, as part of this struggle. They derived the new title from the Book of Revelation. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and I behold a pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death, and hell followed with him. The whole thing was filmed in Byelorussia. Live ammunition and explosives were used to create their effects, and actors nearly drowned while filming the bog scene. Klimov stated, "The subject was too sacred to us to be false." Alexei Kravchenko played the main role of Fliora Gaishun. He was just 14 when filming started in the early 1980s. Klimov knew he had to protect the boy and worked with a hypnotherapist to preserve his mental state during filming. This may have helped, but by the end of the film it becomes clear that Kravchenko has genuinely been through an ordeal and has changed and aged as a character and an actor. Kravchenko did not act in anything else for more than a decade after the experience. On a technical note, the film is also extremely well crafted, intertwining a gross reality with beautiful craftsmanship and creative ways of depicting emotional states and concepts. The sound design is an unsettling, unnerving metaphor masterpiece for the process of going insane and brushing past death several times through the main character's eyes. There were reports of people in Russia and Hungary being taken to hospital because of viewing the film. Despite this, Klimov still concedes that the film is quite reserved in his experience of the truth of war. Klimov managed to accumulate a filmography of 11 films, including a short film named Larissa, dedicated to his wife, Larissa Shepitko, who was also a director as well as a screenwriter and actress. Shepitko died in a car accident in 1979 while location scouting for a film titled Farewell to Matyora. Klimov finished the film in her place in 1983 and settled on a simple and apt title, Farewell. Her death had a profound impact on Klimov and his next and final film, Come and See, 1985. He also never remarried. The pain, struggling and tragedy Klimov experienced in his life can be felt viscerally throughout this film and likely in all of his work at various points. The origins of the broader symptomatic meanings and themes addressed that are embedded in Klimov's films undeniably link to his own first-hand experiences, to the time and place he happened to exist. How could they not? On Come and See, Klimov stated, "Had I included everything I knew and shown the whole truth, even I could not have watched it." After the film's success, Klimov was chosen by his colleagues to be the first secretary of the Filmmakers Union of 1986. He ensured the belated release of previously banned films and the reinstatement of several directors who had fallen out of favor politically. He gave up his position in 1988, frustrated by all the obstacles yet still in his way, and claimed he wanted to make films again. But none came. The Soviet Union finally fell in 1991, and 3 years before his death in 2003, Klimov stated, "I've lost interest in making films. Everything that was possible I felt I had already done."